The camera, the name. This.
Your camera is back.
This is me.
That's this is
Yeah.
this is let me get back.
Okay. Yes.
Good. How many people are online actually?
Let me get it.
Okay. Because I know some people are online.
Yes, we don't have anybody online yet. We don't have anybody online yet.
Okay.
So, yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I was no, I'm here.
You are here. Well,
Yeah,
I was
because-
like, you
I was trying to find out where she sits,
Yeah, that's a good question.
but I see you are probably not up to space, so somewhere like around here. I don't know if they want to move us, I have no idea.
Because of the camera and maybe.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys.
Yeah, we'll just defer to you guys, whatever arrangement you guys want.
All right, sir. All right, sir. The challenge is we have a lot of in-house prices. That's all we have to find. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You just tell us, where to say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just-
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's online. So that's what I was asking. I don't know how
We
many.
don't have anybody online.
So you can't tell, there's no database, you can tell, which is online, no different. You don't have that information.
I'm still have time. You have like 2 minutes.
Yeah. I think people are doing that's what it is.
What do you say?
Yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, last night.
Yeah, I just got to this.
This morning.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Just like every
Yes.
day.
It doesn't, haven't taken class yet.
So that's
Tennessee.
yeah. Oh, we can see. You can see that. You can see that.
Let's do also.
A lot of cool stuff. Everybody's
No, it was.
good. I see that.
It was not all the areas.
Let me check. Let me check. Let me check. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you been done? Have you done a lot of things? Yeah, you were done. When was the last time?
Oh, I was down there 5, 6 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. That's my friend who blood sports. Yes,
You know what? I think he left.
maybe you're right. Maybe you're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you're right. Nice, nice place, nice. Just take out the governor and the government and all will be well, right? And everything will be fine.
Unfortunately, we can't do it
Exactly.
anymore.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But I used to,
You gotta find people in Tennessee, right?
Sorry?
You know, you guys.
we have a little bit of,
It's huge because, right? So,
yeah, we're shielded for the most part. But the public universities are getting a little bit of the Florida type thing. Not quite up to that level, but
how long you been at Madison?
oh, forever, 20 years. Yeah, long time. My first and only job so far.
What?
My first job from grad school, my only job. I don't know if, what that says about me. Maybe I'm not too loyal or too, I'm maybe not very ambitious. I don't know.
Very good. Very good. And you are in the next city. And you've seen that city.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the last 20 years, I've seen it just explode.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
So you have a soccer team.
We have a soccer team down.
Yes.
Yeah, we have it.
You have everything.
So we're thinking of bringing a baseball team, major league, and everything. Hockey, everything. So, yeah. It's not a bad situation.
No, I mean, it's like. Me outside of us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
There's no one that actually like.
Well, you're right. You're right. It's an exciting place now.
Yeah. And like it's just right across. Really, I was there like.
So, and it's good that it's close to our culture.
Yeah.
Because with different places, not to cargo, not to, yes,
I like it.
as a Nigerian, I like Gainesville better because of the weather. It's like, I remember going up to Gainesville in the winter. It was chilly that year, and I got there and I oh, can I take off my jacket?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Okay, so we have somebody on line now.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
do you know?
Yes, I know. So okay, can they see us online?
Of course, I'm using.
Okay, so you can. So I think
Probably. Oh, you're gonna put it. You're gonna put it up there. Okay.
Maybe just the 12 from
No, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah.
Why you already?
Yeah, we can see who's sick. That's the thing.
Uh,
Like if I do, if I do nobody.
Amanda Elmon. Amanda.
Hi.
Hello, Amanda, how are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm well. How are you?
Good, Amanda, how are you? This
I'm
is
well.
Moses.
How are you?
Good,
I know.
Are you from Nashville or where are you?
I'm in my office. I'm here in Nashville.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's good.
I wish I were in Lagos.
So good, and well, good to see you online virtually.
No, you can see the always move things around.
Hey, Bruce.
You know, this guy.
Are you okay? So he's in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll get him a chair. We'll get him a chair.
Okay, great.
I didn't look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ready to cheer.
Yes.
Yeah. So there'll be a great. They're going to do special shit. You don't deserve this one. If the chair says, they're fitting your status. If the chair says so.
So we have another panelist.
Yeah.
Susan Chan. So we got more chairs.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. Yeah. Moses, a chair. Suzanne, okay.
We can see.
Well,
you also need.
No.
you can
share it around.
Yeah, this thing actually. They come sit here first. They're gonna get a chair for him.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. I think it's good for us to all sit in front, not to sit in the audience.
You know what, we can actually put.
Yeah, they're really much. It's good for all.
Yeah, especially because of.
No, don't be cheap. They're really cheap. Which is good.
I'm equally cooking from inside.
So we can the camera.
Yeah. It's, a good view of the camera and the screen.
Please, exactly. Thank you. Thank you so much. Letting me so much.
You go ahead.
We have the script person.
So we are complete.
Yes.
You want to sign off at 2?
Just send it.
Fine, yes. And 2 minutes early. Okay.
No, I mean, it's signing off.
Oh, it's signing off.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, we're starting now. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moses Ochonu, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this panel of first book authors. It is a big deal to publish a book out of your research, especially when that book is based on your dissertation, PhD dissertation research. So I want to start by congratulating all the authors and on publishing their first books. So let us give them a round of applause. I want to welcome Amanda, who's online, as well as Chikezi. So welcome. I don't know if you guys can see us.
Everybody. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Professor Ochonu.
Okay, great.
Lovely to be here.
Yeah. So thank you for showing up again. This is a panel that helps us, the audience, those of us who are aspiring to publish books. This panel helps us to understand the process, what it entails, the journey, the give and take, the struggles, and so on and so forth, from the perspective of these people who have just published their first books. So I'd like to introduce everyone and then go over how this is going to go. So we have 5 first book authors on this panel. The first one is Ademola Adeshola. who is based at Mount Royal University. He is the author of Representations of Child Soldiers in Contemporary African Narratives. Next on the list is Amanda Hellman, who is my dear colleague at Vanderbilt University. She is the author of The Making of Museums in Nigeria. Then we have Nicholas, over there, Nicholas Kerr, who comes to us from the University of Florida. He is the author of Electoral Commissions and Democratization in Africa. And then we have, to my right, Susan Sachs, who is based at Howard University in the US. Her book's title is Networked Poetics. Short and sweet title, I like that. And lastly, we have Chikeze Nzweguna, who is based at Rhodes University in South Africa. The title of his book is Children and Young People's Digital Life Walls. Okay, so the way we are going to do this is I'm going to pose a question and we'll go to the authors in the order that they are listed on the program to give their remarks. Please, let's take about 2 minutes, each of us. I don't know if they can hear me, right?
Yes.
Let's take 2 minutes to respond to the question, and then we'll go to another question.
Yes.
And then we'll try to leave about 30 minutes at the end, because it's just an hour and a half for audience questions. Is that right? Is that good? All right. So the first question that I would like to pose, and it's been a long time since I published my first book, but I remember being so excited. Like the best thing to happen to me as an academic in my young career at the time. So I want you guys to tell us the struggle that went into getting this book in print. I know it's a challenging task to do it in 2 minutes. Tell us your struggles, tell us your moments when you experienced discouragement, you experienced all kinds of negative emotions, but also tell us about your exciting moments, and just give us a succinct summary of the journey that led you to this book being in print. And we'll start with you, Ademola. 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Prof, thank you very much for sharing this thanks for let's say for the opportunity to meet with you on this issue. I do emphasize the process, not just the outcome. So for me, the demand was highly in the process. I should say that from the get-go, when I started my doctoral program, I knew that the ultimate end of this was going to be, or the combination of whatever I was going to do would be a book. And that consciousness began to take root in me from when I started my coursework. I mean, there was another North American educational environment you have to do when you're first work. So I had started thinking about that. But then here are some interesting things. When I was writing the chapter, so configure things, structure them out. I wanted only 4 chapters together with an introduction. But when my supervisor, got it, he looked at what was supposed to be my chapter 4 and said, I'm seeing 2 chapters in this singular chapter. Would you want to break things down and have an entire chapter? Fact is, it was never anywhere on my mind that I was going to have that chapter. So I looked at it, and his advice was, sensitive. So I began to work for it. Even when I submitted what was supposed to be that new chapter, he still was not satisfied. And I would then do what he wanted, or not what he wanted, what we both agreed we should be looking at. He would then tell me, okay, this is too much. I think that's what we have to do here. Remember that this is not your magnus opus. You just want to fulfill this thing. There is a book that will come after it. Why not take some of these and keep them? And let's just satisfy what is required of us, for whatever is left on the program. And then when you want to convert them to a book, you can take time to declaim and say as much as you wanted to. Here is the gist. the chapter he asked me to do, which is chapter 5, turned out to be the best chapter, even by my own record, in the book, as it is the feedback that I have received from different places. I guess the point I want to make here is that when working with a supervisor, it's important to be very methodical and careful in the sense in which you choose supervisor. You're looking for somebody that will add value, not an antagonist in that sense. And that was what my supervisor was, and it paid off richly in that sense. So that's one of the sweetest part of the work for me. Secondly, the work also gave me numerous ideas about what other things to publish and what other things to even create as courses, that I would teach. And if we have time, I could say more about that. When you're doing this kind of work, all kinds of ideas pop up on the screen of your mind, and you want to be careful to take them, to record them, because the faintest of ink is better than the best of ink. Take note of these things. They are things you can develop. I have taught a seminar course since I assumed duty at my current university, and it was a product of when I was writing, this work. In that sense, and a couple of other things that I have taught as well. So those are some interesting things. I could say more than challenging things.
Yeah, Amanda, same question to you. I don't know if you heard me when I was posing the question.
I did. Yeah, no, I would say that my struggle in some ways was internal, right? That, should I publish it? What will I add to the field? My advisor who was very instrumental, obviously all along the way, was pressuring me to publish the dissertation into a book. And I started by just doing an article here or there that was received pretty well. But I also, I work in the university, but I work in museums. And so the sort of tenure pressure, right, the pressure to publish scholarship looks a little bit different for me. So I think some of it was that sort of internal struggle of whether or not I should be publishing the book. But what I saw over the 10 years between when I completed the dissertation and actually published the book was that the landscape around heritage preservation, museums, repatriation had changed, had been amplified in a new way. And so I felt like the research would be valuable in historicizing that context. But also I felt like because I work in a museum now as a director, adding that perspective would be useful. So I think that the struggle was really kind of coming to terms with whether or not I was going to take the next step and revise that dissertation and, recognize the areas that I didn't do very well, go back to, research on the most basic level. And then, of course, kind of mentally preparing yourself for the release of that work, which, previously in the dissertation was a very intimate experience, right? With you and your advisor, with a close, group of other graduate students that you trusted to work through problems, your committee. And so this sort of idea that now you're being peer reviewed by somebody you don't know and can't quite explain yourself to, and then you're going to release it, which means you're opening yourself up to both, criticism and praise about the work. But, at that point, it's out of your hands. Like, I think that, there's the hard work of actually researching and writing, which we all know well, having, worked through the dissertation. But that sort of emotional struggle, I think, is one of the things that that I just really had to kind of work through before I really even considered what it is I'm gonna do and the extra research that I need to do and how I was going to change the story.
Thank you, Amanda. what I'm hearing so far is that it's critical to have the right kind of dissertation advisor to guide you from the dissertation to the book, to give you ideas on how to make that transition. That's great. Nick, you're next. Nicholas.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. So happy to be here at Unilag. It's really good to be back. And you all should be very excited, right? And I'm excited for all of you being here because it means that you've taken the first step on the journey of getting your book published, right?
Yeah.
And so I expect the next 10 years to see multiple books coming out of this room, right? And so we can speak it into being. And one of the things that was a major challenge for me is that my journey was different. I spent 5 years of not working on the book after finishing my dissertation, and then picked the book up after that in my 6th year. And at that point, I didn't feel that I could write the book, right? I didn't have any confidence in myself. I was my major critic. And one of the suggestions I'm going to make to you all is find mentors, including your dissertation advisor. But if you're further along, other folks who have written books who can tell you that your work is good and you just need to keep moving along, right? Because that was my major challenge, right, of not believing myself. The second thing that was a major challenge was that I wrote the book during the pandemic, right? And during that time, I decided to do new field work because I felt the existing field work was old. And a lot of the field work I carried out in Nigeria, and I had to find ways of getting to Nigeria before the pandemic, right? And I was probably in Nigeria 3 times between 2020 and 2021. And then the pandemic hit. And I felt that my entire project was gone, right? And so the other thing I'm going to tell you is just to remain encouraged, right? And find ways of responding to challenges that you might face, right? The last challenge that I experienced was that I felt that I didn't have an original argument anymore because my work had been published in like articles and so. And so, one of the things that you're going to be really working on as you move this dissertation to the book is to refine your argument. But you have to do it in such a way that you're not speaking to your advisors and folks who are in the academy, but you want to make your appeal much broader, right? And so you want to make your argument simple, but you also want to know who you are arguing against. Who are those 4 or 5 main people in the academy that you do not agree with, right? Or you are coming in opposition with, because it allows you to enter into a conversation and engage in a debate with them, right? And the last thing I will say is that one of the things I also was challenged by was making the book interesting, right? And you have to realize that your readership and your audience is much broader. And so you have to find ways of engaging them, right? So I'm going to encourage all of you to read my book on electoral commission. That's the topic, that anybody would be interested. And focus and try to just grab people in the introductions. They might not read anything else, but they read those introductions and it's sufficiently compelling. I'll end there. Thanks so much.
So next we have Susanna. Thoughts on the same question?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think my thoughts are really going to echo what's already been said there, especially I had a similar experience of trying to revise during pandemic and made a different choice. I ultimately decided not to do more fieldwork, but instead to refine them. Sorry, not this, not right, but instead to limit what I was going to be able to do and shift based on that. So I guess I was seeing and hearing these challenges along kind of 3 primary lines, right? Challenges that are internal, my own, what's going on around me, challenges as like community shifts, and then with the product and the broader audience. So what happened to me that I think is not uncommon is I finished the dissertation and started a job. And that job wanted me to publish, but it also mostly wanted me to teach a lot and show up to service and do these things that are really critical day to day, while what had been my primary work now needed to be like fully self-propelled. And that required a real shift in how I thought about my relationship to, or the relationship between my work and the job that I had, was no longer as a graduate student. And it also required a shift in my relationship to my life, because I needed to make different space for this when so much of the pressure was on teaching. And so that required setting some things aside or making up room in different places, sometimes from sleep, in order to make that work for me. And I think that that's something that is important to acknowledge. Even if you do get that job that we all want, there's other challenges that come out of that. At the same time, I was moving from a graduate school community where I was very fortunate to have good, close interlocutors to a place where I was the only one doing this work. And so that meant that I had to be really proactive, as others are describing, of finding community, finding conversation, and making sure that this work continued to matter to me and I continued to understand significance, especially when, the world was shutting down. And then that brings us back, I think, to finding the readers. I, like Nick, knew who I was arguing against, but making sure, and I think this is often true, interesting word, I'll say my book is interesting. I was bringing together 4 different conversations. And how did I know that anyone would want to read a book that was only 1/4 about the thing that they cared about, right? So many of us are doing interdisciplinary work or work that bridges fields. And so thinking about, where is my voice in this conversation and how can I make every single group interested in all of the others rather than only focusing on their own, I think is my final challenge that I would point to. Or talking about the publishing process as well.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Chikeze who's online. Chikeze, take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be part of the panel. I hope you can hear me. I wished I was in the room. I'm in Lagos, but not at the conference yet. I'll be from tomorrow because I just arrived from the Netherlands this morning. So please forgive me. My experience is very similar to some of my other panelists. When I finished my PhD in 2019, I knew that I wanted to publish from the PhD, but I actually did not see the idea of a book at first until an external examiner, one of my external examiners, really suggested or strongly suggested that the thesis be turned into a book. And so, although I published two journal articles from the thesis, I really spoke with my supervisor, who encouraged me to pursue the suggestion by the external examiner. And so what I did was, because I had this deep desire and willingness, just like Ademola said earlier, a desire for you to actually make something out of that thesis, much more than just the thesis being in a shelf that nobody will read. And so I went on a journey of doing research about how to actually publish a book from a thesis. And what I found, one of the first things that I did was to speak to new authors, speak to people who just published from their thesis. I met some of them at conferences and they gave me insights about what to do, some of the commissioning editors to write to, some of the publishing houses to start from, especially people who, in terms of my field, which is media and communication, some of the publishers who might be interested. So that was what I did. And so the second thing I did was to write an email to one of the commissioning editors at Palgrave Macmillan. And why I say this is that you have to be proactive in this process. Your supervisor may not be the person to drive this process. You have to drive it because you have to have that strong desire to see this happen for you, for yourself and for your career. So after the email I wrote to the commissioning editor then put me in contact with the book series editor. So there was a book series editor that publishes books in my field, media and communication. And this book series was published in conjunction with Palgrave and the International Association for Media and Communication Research, which is IAMCR, which is like the biggest association for those of us in media and communication. And so the The book series editors then took over corresponding with me, but of course alongside with the commissioning editor. So one of the first things I was asked to produce was a proposal. So I say this again for you to know that you have to prepare two major things as such about getting on this process. A proposal, a book proposal is important. You have to download the format for that particular publisher that you want to publish with. You have to download their format for book proposals and come up with a book proposal based on what you want to do. And then you have to come up with a sample chapter. These were the first things that I submitted to the commissioning editor and the book series editors. And these were the key documents that they looked at and then submitted to the committee, to the review committee. They sent these documents out to two external reviewers who also came back with some feedback that this book has potential and that the process can go on. So it was after these processes that I was given a contract. Palgrave then gave me a contract. But this took about 1.5 years. And what I learned also in this process was that you have to, like I said before, drive the process. You have to follow up with the commissioning editors. You have to follow up with the editor in charge and also the book series editors, because things can often get lost in the mail. People are busy with their lives. And so if you keep waiting for them to get back to you and you think it's going to happen naturally, you might be in for a surprise. So follow up, follow up, follow up. And then finally, the other thing I want to share is that the process of turning your thesis into an actual book is a different ball game, because the book is not going to be a thesis, it's going to be a book. And so you have to know that there's a lot of rewriting and revising that that will be required. And so from that 2019 that I finished my PhD up until 2020, the end of 2023, that I submitted the final manuscript to the publisher, I kept updating and revising. You have to update some of the information or the arguments and the sources in your previous thesis in order for it to become a book that you want to be out in the world, especially to make a particular impact. So that is my my summary, as far as I can put it in 2 minutes or more. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikeze. Thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to save this conversation about the nitty-gritty of the process, how you go about approaching editors, how you go about submitting proposals. But thankfully, Chikeze has started us on that part already, has started that conversation, which is great. I think that saves us time at the end. But what I'm hearing so far from the panel, I've noted some points that I want to just put out there. How you balance the demands of teaching, because for most of us, once you get the PhD, you go into jobs in academia. For a few people like Amanda, you go into jobs in non-profits and in other aspects of academia, maybe that don't involve teaching. She's a museum director in a university, but she doesn't have to teach. So, but it's still, you are balancing the job of rewriting a dissertation into a book with whatever full-time job you have, right? How do you go about that? That's one challenge that all of them have to deal with. How do you write a different kind of introduction, right, than the one that you wrote for the dissertation? Because for the dissertation, the introduction was for an audience of what? 6 people, 5 people, your committee, right? And your external, whatever you call it in Nigeria, external supervisor. But the dissertation to the book, you are writing it to the entire world. So it's a different audience, it's a bigger audience. Nick told us about how the process of balancing what to publish from the dissertation. You have a 400-page dissertation. How much of it should you publish as an article so that you don't render the book almost meaningless and redundant, right? Yeah. But also at the same time, once you've published certain articles and essays from the dissertation, how can you then rewrite the book so that you don't repeat the same ideas, so that the book is offering something bigger and newer, right? That's one challenge. There's talk among the panelists about finding the right kind of mentors, but also not just mentors, good advisors, mentors, but also I like what the word that Nick used, confidence boosters. Okay, so not all mentors are confidence boosters. So if you have mentors, as people come to this mentorship thing with different strengths, it's okay to have multiple mentors. They will give you something different. Each of them will give you something different. Some of them will give you they will motivate you and boost your confidence. Some of them will give you very practical, usable advice in terms of the work itself. Some of them will give you other things. Okay, so it's okay, as Amanda said, if you have a job, as dean, as director of this, director of that, you are a teacher, you are teaching university courses, you can bring all of those perspectives into the book in a way that you couldn't do when you were a dissertating student, right? Now you have a job, now you've had experience teaching university course for 5 years. That experience in your teaching has given you a lot of new ideas. Your students too have enriched your repertoire, right? It's okay now to revise the dissertation along those lines because you've learned a lot of new stuff. So whatever job you have post-PhD, that job should give you new perspectives of looking at the topic and looking at the ideas that you've presented. And then I have the two final points that I noted down. When you release the work into the broader world, you have to make a mental adjustment to receive criticism, to receive a different kind of criticism than the one that you got from your dissertation committee, to receive a different kind of engagement than the one that you got from your friends and your institution. Now you're writing into a broader academic space, so you should expect a different kind of engagement. And therefore, that calls for refining the arguments, refining and simplifying, I like the word simplifying, to appeal to a broader audience. You have to write more clearly. Okay, this is the time to get rid of some of those esoteric disciplinary jargon, okay, that are not necessary, okay, and so on and so forth. So this is what I've gotten so far. We're going to go into the next round of questions now. So the question that I want to pose now, I don't want theoretical answers, please. I want answers to be as practical as possible. Is how, in your experience, turning your dissertation into a book, how would you say that the dissertation was different from the book that has now been published? What are the differences in terms of all the different components, the introduction, chapters, conclusions, the prose, anything that you are comfortable speaking about from your own experience? Because people say the dissertation is a totally different animal than the book. So from your practical experience, what are those differences that maybe our audience can take away from this panel? Yeah. We start from Ademola.
Yeah. Again, this is the thing. We are aware that flexibility is an important component of this process. And I will explain that with regard to what I did. As I said earlier, from day one when I was going to start my own doctoral journey, I knew I was going to publish it. And when I had my first meeting with my supervisor, he would himself, as a prerogative person, I asked and said, what is the end point of this? We had that conversation, and I gave me the vision that I had for what I wanted to do. And so from the get-go, we were both clear that we were going to be doing two things. We would want to satisfy the requirements and mainly speak to the audience that we have within the committee. We do that on one. On the other, you have going to have a different audience. So when I was writing, that's why I say flexibility is the thing. I also knew that there's going to be a process of transition. And I was using, as they say, one stone to kill two birds. I would write a chapter as long as I wanted it to be. And when my supervisor get to look at what about that, he would say, no, here is what we will need here. I think the point is sufficiently made for the kind of audience that we want to address. In this instance, this other thing, you have to bank it. And think more seriously about that for different, and I was, I had that folder, a book folder, the thesis folder. Whatever my supervisor is flagged, whatever I come to a decision to, doesn't fit me, I house it, in the office folder. And I was doing, that kind of work. So, so much was it that I didn't have kind of problem with how much do you publish as for journal. Because once the whole thing was done, I knew I was going to do only one article from the book. And there's a challenge with that. Again, people work differently. If that's what you are going to do, and you will need papers, because I finished, I did my defense in January 2022. And before July, I got my tenure position. So again, that made it clear to me that I will need this work very quickly. The challenge with that is if you are going to publish only one chapter from your dissertation, it then means you have to come up with something for journal articles, which was very, but I was willing to do that kind of work. And that's what I did. So I published only one chapter and began to work on other things. For the book, I had the material already. So when it was time to begin to work on the book, what I did was to now come to the point that if somebody who is not even in the university is going to be engaging this, how do I want to come to them? And that is the decisions to be made. So language refinement, structural adjustment, deletion. Even, don't forget, the folder that I have for thesis, it doesn't mean that really I have to use them. There are things that I'm saying that I saw and knew, that I had to let go. And let me say this, and I'll make one more point and keep quiet. Please don't have this kind of relationship with your work, which is don't be so overprotective of certain ideas and say they are not going to go because I conceive them, have them, they must go somewhere. No, they may not be useful at the point when you are going to be making a decision. So let them, I know they are like babies. You don't want to give back to your baby and start dismembering. They can be very painful, right? But you have to come to that decision. This is one of the painful things you have to do. Some ideas look very good to you, but if you are thinking quite critically, they have no place in what you are now doing. Let them go. Because letting them go also means you are clearing the ground for newer ideas to spring. Because if you don't, and you stick with those, you're limiting yourself. And that's not a scholar mind. Scholar doesn't operate like that. So that's some decisions that you have to make in that regard. The other thing as a decision that I have to make, which is final fundamentally, if you are already, if you already got it, kind of position, first is you have to understand my university, which place will I publish that is acceptable today? I say this because academic presses are acceptable in some institutions, and they are not in others. It's university presses that you must compulsory use. So you want to take care to understand, because you can labor in vain if you don't have that important knowledge or understanding of what is required at the institution where you are. Knowing this allows you to determine which way you want, which path you want to beat. That's also something you have to, take in mind. In my own case, once I studied my institution, you could do academic press, you could do university press, and I realized one thing again, your research is never going to end. At every juncture that you have to do something about this transition that is happening to your thesis and to your book, you have to be researching things anew. So for me, the research was, what is the difference, particularly between academic presses and university presses? And that's what I went into. And from what I found out, largely the processes are the same, except, in terms of the time it will take. I found out that academic university presses take more time, so the reasons. And university academic process, even with the same process, they get the breast to take very quickly. Not that it's a wishy-washy thing. They can take a year, it can take 2, but longer. I mean, not as long as what you have in universities. So I did that. And once you have determined your process, always keep a tab on the timeline that the press itself, advertises. So if they say in 6 months, we are going to get back to you with reviewers' notes, and 6 months, 1 week has passed, you have not heard from them, you should be knocking on their door. Because as one of my colleagues has said, things can get lost.
Yes. So I love that practical answer, very experiential and quite personalized. So this needs to be said quickly, building off of what you said, Ademola, because we may forget to say it later on. The dissertation, keep in mind, the dissertation is just the beginning. Even the book itself, the beginning of your scholarly publishing career. It's not the end of it. Okay? So building up what they said about letting things go, stepping things aside, and keeping certain things for the future. Related to that is that if you have a job that doesn't require you to publish a book before you are promoted to the next round, before you are given tenure, sometimes you can get by publishing just articles, and you're fine. And then if you have such a job, if you want to keep the dissertation to incubate and gestate and to reflect upon it and to get to a point where you can produce a better book, maybe that might be the path for you, right? That might be the better path for you. Keep it. There's no need to rush it. If your job does not require you to publish it into a book right again, then keep it. You might, in the end, publish a better book. Okay? So it all depends on your individual circumstance, your career projections, and so on. Sometimes you are better off just keeping the dissertation, and then 4 years later you go back to it, and you have fresh perspective on it, and you are able to come up with a better, stronger book. We go to Amanda now.
Thank you for that, Moses, because I think that's exactly right. And I feel a little bit like the old lady here because I did wait about 7 years between the dissertation and then even, thinking about publishing, right? And I took about 6 months to sort of think about what that would look like and then started to apply to different publishers. And many rejected me. So it was sort of this kind of thinking through what I really wanted this to be like. And I think about the differences between the dissertation where it's really a thought piece in so many ways, where you're justifying your position with the research that you did, right? You're demonstrating that you know the things that you're supposed to know. And, you're still the probably strongest expert, right, on that topic, because you're the one who did the research. But I think about how you're really showing your research to your committee. And you're also able to justify the research that could not be done. You're talking with your advisor to say, I couldn't get to that archive, and if we're going to stay kind of on schedule, this is maybe what's missing, and is that okay, right? And then I think about how you shift that to a book, that you really have to commit to a perspective. And that means you have to cut. So, I probably cut 70% of the project, right? And had to then sort of rebuild it the way I sort of needed to like really commit to a perspective and not sort of get lost in those thought pieces, even though that sort of academic interesting part is the kind of wandering through this information, because you now have this really holistic view of something, and you are trying to convey that to an audience in far fewer words, right? You're like building up this trust, and you're saying essentially that you should trust the things that I'm saying, know that I have the research to back it up, and you're showing that a little bit, but not quite as much as you are in the dissertation. And I do think that choosing a Okay. I think you have some of that control over who the publisher might be, but I do think it has to align with your goals. And for me, because I'm not using it to get a promotion or get tenure, just making sure that it was a publisher that, peer reviewed the work was the most important thing that I was really looking for. But I do think you kind of have to approach the process of dissertation and book very differently, because you really need to commit to those ideas that you're conveying.
Thank you. Nicholas.
Yeah, so quite quickly, and I'll make it real, right? Your dissertation is like you're a student, right? A PhD student, actually, right? Where you're trying to prove to your dissertation committee and your advisor that you know the literature well enough. You did a good job, in applying what you learned in grad school. It's like you're proving yourself to everyone. The book, it's almost as if you're an expert and you are trying to convince everyone of this novel argument that you're making. And you don't really care about what other people have said in the past if it doesn't align with this argument that you're making, but you're trying to establish yourself as the expert in the field versus the dissertation where you're trying to prove that you should be around the team. You see the difference, right?
Very clear.
And because of that, it influences so many aspects of the project itself. You guys, and before I emphasize this, my dissertation was boring, right? Nobody wants to read that, right? There are probably about 10 people. Well, there are a few that have read it, but outside of your family members, nobody else wants to read it. You want to make your book engaging, both for the scholarly community and all of the other communities that might be interested in reading your book, including students. You want to know boring books, right? When you're, reading your, as undergrad and PhD students, right? So you know what that is, to read a boring book versus one that is engaging. The other part of it that I've emphasized before is the argument. In my dissertation, I had like 10 million arguments going on and I packed it into the dissertation. In the book, it's one central, simple argument, right? And I'll just give an example. Electoral commissions provide information and they impact how you think about elections and behave during elections, right? And I can, just put that in one sentence or two sentences and it feeds throughout the entire book. You may not agree with me, but you read the book to the end to try to disprove that argument, for instance. And the last thing is the dissertation. The dissertation, you don't think about the broader implications of your work, but the book forces you to think about the broader implication. So I study electoral commissions, but my book's findings have implications for any institution, any political institution out there. And I would think of other types of institutions that help to influence how you form your attitudes and how you behave in the political space. So it might be the church, right? For instance, it might be, the bus driver on the road, for instance, and how he puts on music, different type of news, for instance. So thinking about the broader implications, and that's how you're able to draw in a broader audience. I'll end it.
Very, very, very nice, very practical. So simply put, you think of dissertation equals student, right? Book equals expert. See, very clear. A very good teacher, I can tell. All right. Susanna.
Yeah, so I want to take up your suggestion of be practical. So practically, here is what I did, I suppose. The first thing I asked myself, and this gets to, maybe it doesn't need to be a book, maybe it needs to be articles. Maybe you abandon this idea and your first book is something else. Why does this need to be a book? Why is it not just 4 essays in a theme, right? What sort of narrative arc, argumentative arc ties it all together such that to read the final chapter, that fifth chapter, you had to have read the fourth and the third and the should stand on its own because that's how teaching works. But what ties it all together? Once I had that then meant going back into the introduction to make sure that claim, that central argument was clear, and this point about you're not speaking to just your dissertation committee anymore. It was clear enough to a wider audience. I was publishing about social media poetry by African youth for, frankly, a North American audience, which is a mistake I made with my publisher, which I'll talk about in a bit. But that meant that I had to frame it differently than I did for my dissertation committee. I needed to give different information to make sure that my audience understood and knew why they should care, why this really did matter to them, because it does. The second thing I did is once I had that, I went back into the individual chapters and excised a lot of things that I liked, but were no longer so focused, and brought in new examples. Some of that was updating. Some of it was noting, okay, this is where I'm going. And now that I know where I'm going, what's wrong here, right? Like I look at social media, so it had stopped being as relevant to talk about YouTube between when I started in 2015 and when I was writing it in 2021. That was a shift that I had to make in one chapter. Other things, I think there were moments in my dissertation where I was maybe being a little cute or citing people because I thought I had to cite that. And this was a chance to say, no, really, what am I doing? And owning that voice of expertise is crucial in each of those chapters. And then ensuring, and in much the same way when you're constructing a shorter piece, you're making sure that each paragraph kind of refers back to the one before. We know why we're reading it. You're doing that at the structural level as well. And that means taking the citations and the prose. And then the final thing I want to point to here is about the publisher. We've gestured this in a few different ways. Different publishers publish different kinds of books. And so I would say this is like a dance, right? Maybe I really want to publish with this university press. Well, they publish a different kind of thing than Lexington or than UMass. So if I know that already, what does my book need to look like to do that? Alternatively, maybe my book go in one of two different directions. What publishers are available to me? I do that. Kind of a back and forth as you're thinking through this. And that can sometimes just mean the introduction is a little different, but often it means the structure of the books. And then in terms of making it more engaging, I really focused more on telling a story, on giving characters, on giving a narrative arc, rather than in literature, I think, rather than sort of thinking about the tropes and the themes, I wanted to focus on the actors who were present. So I think those kind of major things of why is this a book? What do I need to do to make it that way? And who am I speaking to? Really what went into it. Oh, and one other practical thing, really absurdly practical. I personally found Eric Hyote's The Elements of Academic Style an extremely useful book for revising from my overwrought dissertation prose into ones. So
Elements of
academic style. Yeah.
Excellent point, Susanna. Okay, so I like your point about you justifying the book in a different audience. For a dissertation, we justify it to a very small community, the committee, our immediate interlocutors in the field of sociology or history or whatever the field is. For the book, you are justifying it. You are saying this book is important for this and that reason. And those reasons are totally different from the reasons that you give to your advice. The justification has to shift as well. I love that point. Chikeze, please.
Okay.
Same question.
Yes. Okay. I want to agree with what the other panelists have said. For me, it was different for me in terms of the title as well. So the title had to change because you find that sometimes your PhD thesis can be very boring in its title, but for your book, you have to make it interesting. You have to make it interesting for your audience and for the scholarly community. Secondly, for me, is also to determine how many chapters the book would be. So, for example, if your thesis has 10 chapters, you can decide that your book will be 5 chapters only. And that you decide based on what you have determined that your focus is, right? The focus of your thesis is different from the focus of the book. But I think I was too ambitious. My dissertation was 10 chapters, or had 10 chapters. I ended up having a book with 10 chapters. How I managed to do that, I don't know. And then
Wow.
in terms of the language, in terms of the language was very important to me because this is, of course, was in a very scholarly language, very restricted language for a particular group of people, which are scholars. But in my book, I intended to use everyday language and personalized language and scholarly language. So I combined everyday language with personalized language, that is bringing in my own voice there. And then also my scholarly, in the scholarly language of the people in the field. And then the other thing that is different was that I decided that the book has to be a story with coherence and cohesion, rather than a thesis that is very structured in a particular way. So the book will have to be a story that runs from the beginning to the end with a plot, with themes, and with cohesion and coherence in a way that is very different from how a thesis is structured based on university guidelines and faculty guidelines and departmental house styles and so on and so forth. And then lastly, Chair, I want to go back to the question you posed about what do you do when you have published some journal articles previously? And so what I did, I published two journal articles from 2 chapters of the thesis before the book came out or before the book happened. So what I did was to contact the journal editors and get copyright permissions to reuse some parts of those publications in the book. And it was really a very easy process. Once you contact the editors, they'll give you the go-ahead, give you a letter, and you're good to go. But I will have to warn our colleagues here, if you want to do that, please make sure that the journal article will differ in some ways from what you put in the book. Do some rewriting and do some revising so that it's not just the exact same thing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chikeze. For the next round of questions, the final ones, we will start with Amanda because she has to leave at 5. So, Amanda, I'm aware of that. So, but I wanted to say a few things quickly. On the question of how much or how many chapters published from the dissertation, right? The rule of thumb is not more than 2. Most publishers are concerned or would be concerned if you publish more than 2 chapters from the dissertation. Most publishers, regardless of whether you get permission from the journal or not. Okay, so the rule of thumb is not more than 2. 1 is perfect, more than 3, but 2 is okay. Not more than 2. In terms of title, Chikeze brought that up. Very, very good point. I've been doing this for so many years, and I'm still very bad at giving titles to my work. You know why? Because my titles tend to be very turgid and descriptive. Yeah. I'm not very good at coming up with this very catchy, sexy, seductive titles that people give their work. Sometimes when I read to people, like, how did he come up with this? How did she come up with this? I wish I could have come up with it. But you know what? The thing is, when you transition from the dissertation to the book, the title has to change. The title of a dissertation has to be descriptive. Okay, that's just the rule. It should describe. But the title of the book cannot be descriptive. It has to be catchy in a way that draws people in and holds people's attention. Okay, when the book is on display at a bookstore, you don't want people to walk by. You want people to stop. Okay, so that's why sometimes the publishers themselves will suggest that you change the title. Okay, so that's a good point. And then finally, something else that Chikeze brought up, which is this idea of how many chapters to keep from the dissertation to the book. That's a recurring thing. I think everyone has spoken about that. It's a real struggle. Even I struggled with it when I was publishing my first book. But to tell you the truth, the brutal truth, and it's very painful to hear this, is that it's not just in Nigeria or the United States. Globally, attention spans are diminishing. Okay, yeah. People don't want to read a 9-chapter book. I would not want to read a 9-chapter book. If I see a book that is huge, I just go for the introduction. I want to get the gist of it. I don't have time. I have 1,000 things swelling up in my head. I have all this family stuff. I have too many things to do. So the fewer the chapters, the better. As a general rule now, our world is evolving. We're moving into a digital. We have a digital scholar here. You know, so the concept of the book itself is becoming outdated somewhat. So the more succinct you can be, the tighter you can keep it. And it's okay to get rid of, if you have a 9-chapter dissertation like he did, it's okay to get rid of 4 or 5 and keep the book short and compact. That's what people want to read. Nobody wants to read a 10-chapter book. I'm a mentor to a lot of young scholars. And I was dealing with a young mentee of mine recently who has this crazy idea of publishing his first book, for that matter, publishing a 9-chapter book as well. And I said to him, I'm not going to mention his name, some of us in this room know him. And I said, these are 2 books. Why would you want to, shortchange yourself? And it's based in North America. I said you could get promoted to full professor on the street of research. So why would you want to do that to yourself? Just cut it and publish the first part and keep the second part. And then you have your full profile for promotion to full, not just tenure. So anyway, so for the final set of questions that I'm going to put, Amanda had to run, so I will start with her.
Before you
yes, go ahead.
Just one point on the last thing you said. It's not just about how many chapters, it's also about the length of each chapter as well. If there was any battle I had with my teacher's advisor, who is a layman, for him, a decent dissertation shouldn't be 200 pages or less. He would argue and say, do you read, and ask and say, do you read what you write, in the cover of this? In partial fulfillment. That you have done all other things, but this one is just party. So don't make it the whole thing. So that it was a big deal. I tried twice, he rejected my chapters. And I'm not going to read it. It's too long. So I was forced.
It's a practical issue. All right. So last set of questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for questions. And we'll start with Amanda on this one. Please, if you could just panelists. I know Chief has started that conversation already, but in practical terms, how the process of approaching an editor, the publisher, the press, what did you do? Did you just write to them out of the blue? Did you send a cold email? Were you referred to by somebody? Did you meet them at a conference? And also, how many people rejected you? I got rejected by a lot of people. And then obviously one of them said yes. So how did you do rejections, and how did you recalibrate that process? I want us to keep our responses short on this one, because I want the audience to have a chance to ask questions. Amanda, we'll go to you first. 2 minutes, if possible, please.
I will say, I wonder if all of us could say how many words or chapters we cut from even our final manuscript. I cut about 20,000 words from my final manuscript before I turned it in. So I wrote the book and then cut, 80 pages. But we all know sort of which publishers publish good books in our field. So I started there, right? And would look for the subject matter editors. I also asked my friends and colleagues, do you have any contacts that I could reach out to? And proposed my book. Sometimes you can't do that and you have to submit your proposal through just the typical channel, which is so time consuming, but is kind of also helps you refine things. In the end, what I'll say is that an editor reached out to me. And they had seen my work at a conference and were wondering if I would be able to expand my paper into a book, or had thought about that and what that would look like. So it's the sort of thing where I think using your network is very important and being very aware of your field. But I also think getting out there and looking at these, going to the conferences, participating in the conferences, building up a network there is also really important, and ultimately is how this project got through, because I think that the process is slow and tedious, but there are lots of roadblocks along the way. So again, creating these networks and putting yourself out there in a variety of contexts is important.
Well, thank you, Amanda. I know you have to go. Thank you for your contributions. Everyone's story is different with regards to this question. So we'll go to Ademola and then take it briefly.
Right.
Not to give you
I like to begin by saying the place you go to first to begin to have ideas about who publishes what is to take on the responsibility of reviewing news. It's because in your field particularly, and you see who's publishing what. And the next phase is about understanding individual press processes. They differ, even though they are a point of convergence. But you have to know. In my own case, once I decided I was going to publish and I was reading through all of the places I would like to go to, fortuitously, I got contacted by this press, and they said, okay, you attended a particular conference, we saw your abstract. Are you thinking of a book or whatever it is? So luckily, I was thinking of a book, so I set up a meeting with the acquisition editor. Each press has an acquisition editor who hunts for these things. And then we had that meeting. I was able. So it's also important before you go to that meeting, read very well about the press and have questions for them. Don't forget, yes, they want to publish for you, but they have their own interest. And it doesn't matter if they undermine those to achieve this. So you have to be very attentive to that. And that is to say, go to that meeting with prepared questions. Hear more, even if you understand. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And now, Nicholas.
Yeah, so I'm a political scientist, and I tell you to be very strategic, right? And your strategy has to start from understanding who your network is and who your advisors are, because you want to surround yourself with folks, right, who have published at the presses that you would like to publish. Because one of the most important references that you can get when you are submitting your proposal is from somebody who had already published at that specific press, right? And that's the road I went, where I asked a faculty member in my department to introduce me to the editor of one press, right? And then another friend of mine who had been publishing as well, right, and recently published, to introduce me to the editor at another press, and that provided the way in. The other thing I would tell you, and I'd suggest that you do this, is to send your manuscripts to multiple presses. This was looked down upon originally, that you should only send to one press, but your professional career hinges on getting this book published, and you don't want to leave it up to one editor. So you want to send it out to as many as you can, and just let the chips fall as they may. And the right person.
You mean the proposal and the sample chapters?
Well, you can it differs, but the proposal, the first thing you're gonna have to send out before you send out the book, the full book, is the proposal, right? So you send the proposal and an introductory letter to multiple presses, right? The ones you hear back from are the ones who are serious, and then you kind of have, this dance where you decide who you want to go with, if you are that successful. And I got the chance to do that. And I made a decision to go with the press who was most responsive because I wanted to know that during the period of which this is going to, the review, publication, that the editor would respond. And the editor actually said to me, I will respond to you in 2 days, right after an email. The other editor, and I won't call any names, didn't respond for about a month and a half. Couldn't live with that, right? And so I made my decisions based on that. And I'll end there and I can answer questions.
Excellent point, very practical. Chikeze. Oh, did I say no? Chikeze, not wait. Susanna, sorry. I didn't mean to.
I would probably echo what Dr. Kev said in many cases. I'll start. I actually began for myself by writing the book proposal, which another practical piece. There's a great book called The Book Proposal Book by Laura Portwood-Sacer that walks through it. Now, every press, and this gets back to Amanda's point, every press was slightly different requirements, so like just what they're looking for in the proposal. But if you have a draft of it, it's relatively easy to adjust to their needs. And that was helpful for me in 2 ways. One, it meant that I could go to the press's website, figure out who the correct editor for my interests were, email them and say, hi, here's a 1-sentence brief. Would you be interested in talking? I can also share a proposal, and be ready if they said yes. And that was great. Having a relatively polished proposal also meant that I approached a bunch of presses. I think I approached 8. I got one right off the bat that was like, we're not publishing this. That's fine. That's not about me. That's their direction. Another that ultimately decided that the book was not. But in the end, I actually also had an experience where an editor reached out to me. They had a series that I liked. I felt like I trusted them. And at that point, I had this experience over, frankly, 6 months by then of going to editors, thinking things through, talking to peers who had published. If the practice condition was their experience of it. Looking at what presses were publishing prize-winning books, those kinds of things. Whose covers look pretty? That matters to me. I don't think marketing. And then that allowed me to feel like I was in control of where this manuscript was growing because it is mine. And the last thing that I'll say that's important to remember, and Lila pointed to this, they also need us, right? We're always like, oh, will you please publish me? I'm here. They need content too, and they need good content. So if you're bringing them good content, you should feel like you can own that.
Well, thanks so much. So I think, oh, Chikeze, I'm going to skip you. You told us your process. So I like something that Susanna brought up before I turn it over to you guys, the audience, which is that, because I was wondering, as Ademola and everybody else was thinking, that I must be the only person who got rejections, because it seems like they were being approached by these presses. They were now, it's like, what's going on nowadays? Are these people now, that's not you enjoy the honeymoon with these presses, that they are approaching you, they're not even rejecting you. In my days, I got rejected by several. And one thing that changed the game for me, actually 2 things, was something that Nicholas mentioned, which is this person who boosts your confidence. The mentor, but who's also a confidence booster. Because when you get so many rejections, we all human beings, let's be honest. Yeah, absolutely. It will affect you psychologically. And then you feel like, is there any merit in this work at all? Or should I pivot to something completely different? Can I ever get this thing out in this world? And this guy looked me in the face, this mentor, who is a confident, said, look, Moses, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this argument. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this work. It's just not the kind of work that these people like. And maybe it's also, but then he told me something else that I'm going to give to you guys for free as advice. He also told me that there's a way that you can reframe the same argument. Same argument, don't change it. But you can reframe it to be more appealing, to be more apparent, to be more attractive to the editors who are reading this proposal and making a decision on it. So again, speaking to the issue of language and repetition, the same argument. And I can tell you that was my first book. I didn't have to change the argument. I just had to reframe it. Reframe it so that it appears like something new. That one advice. I just met with this mentor of mine over breakfast at his hotel for 10 minutes, and he just put this idea in my head. That was it. That was what made the difference. So it's very important that you find those people that surround yourself with those kind of people that can give you that kind of practical advice, but that also have your back and they want you to succeed and they can boost your confidence when you are down because you are going to be down a lot, especially when you get rejections because you are going to get rejected a lot in this process. And I see, okay, definitely, because they have you guys have it so good now. But anyway, I've spoken too much. We'll turn it over to the audience. We'll take questions. Okay, I see 4 hands. I think let's start with the young man in the cap and then.
Thank you so much.
Keep it brief, please. We only have what 18 minutes, maybe.
Yes, sir. My question is quite funny because we have been talking about the processes and all, but I don't know. For somebody who is not looking towards a tenured appointment or who is not working in the university, what do you stand to gain financially? Nothing.
My friend, this is a Wahala question. All right, let's keep that one in the bank. Let's come to the front. We'll answer it. We'll keep it in the bank.
My question is very simple. I'm appreciating this panel for this thoughtful and simple but very important point that I got from this. You said something the opposite. The most important thing is that we must not publish more than 2 papers.
That's the rule of thumb.
That's the rule. Kind of what they want and things like that. But having published like 3 papers from my thesis presently, and I'm even trying to talk my lesson is very, very attractive as a digital skills, organizational support, and utilization of AI tools among academic librarians in Southwest Nigeria. Yeah, you said you can reframe the title and send and publish it. But the way I wrote the way I wrote it is such that I can even after publish like 4 or 5 papers from it. That's for just my theoretical review, my introduction, my chapter 4, as in the analysis and chapter. I still have my empirical review untouched, of which after this, publishing all this like 4 papers from it, I have the intention of publishing the empirical review. The Taylor and Francis group came to our university just last month, and I spoke with one of them. I said, he can mentor me and to tell me about, well, this is against what you said that if I publish 2, that I cannot.
Not more than 2 is what I said.
No, that's one, not more than 2, and I've already gotten it.
It's a rule of thumb. It's not a hard and fast. It's not like
all right.
It's not set in stone.
Okay.
But why don't we respond quickly to her, especially to the other question, then we can take something. Anybody wants to? Doesn't have to be all 3 or 4.
I would think that the challenge that is the challenge with me. To understand. Yes, can we go ahead? So when you're writing your proposal, there's depending on which and I cannot press all the presses out. Let's say this last section. How many chapters have been or what have you published? What is the percentage of what you're expecting? I think it's important to have a conversation with them. Since as Prof said, nothing is cast in stone. It might be the case that they could say, okay, we are set for 50% and you have 60%. We can live with that. Okay. I think the business is with me and whichever press has agreed to have you send proposal. Then order you're sending. So you can do it.
It's negotiable, but then it's 50 minutes. Okay. Can we respond briefly to the gentleman's question? Anybody want?
Okay, so very briefly, this is not universal, but academic publishing is not going to get you the money. If you are interested in publishing to get money from it, I would suggest looking more at trade presses and more like popular style writing, rather than one that's primarily going towards academic.
We're going to be efficient. We'll take 2 questions from the room and 1 from online, please. There are questions online waiting for us. I saw your hand, and I think I'll take your question. I'll see you. Let me take both of you. Your hands were up before you. I'm making a mental note.
Yeah, I have a critical question.
Yeah, we'll come to you.
My question was somehow inspired by was kind of I didn't know he said when he was writing, the centuries, the supervisor said, you have enough data, put it somewhere. So it means that data is thesis. I said, and data is you. You have to publish something. I realize that all the analysts here, they are on that part of the world, where they get money for their thesis.
Yeah.
What is the position of money in all? Because I went to somewhere around here to get data on one project on Gorilla last week. That's not something to develop, document, if something. They started asking money. How you don't have data? How do you go about it?
Okay.
What will motivate you?
Okay, thank you. My brother, yes, ask your question on that.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you very much, sir. My question is, all the speakers, they have a common ground. Can you please common ground is that in that process, the person needs to have a mentor that will guide, a mentor or a guidance that will guide. My question is that what if you have a case whereby the person you call a mentor goes back to steal your content or data or idea and publish without the consent? What are you going to do in that scenario? Just imagine.
Okay, great question. Great question. Let's take one online. Can you read it for us?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible?
Yes.
Is it there?
Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Joshua Adeshino. It says, if 2 chapters out of the many from the dissertation are okay for book publishing, is publishing more than one book from a single thesis / dissertation ideal, or could suggest being over ambitious?
Okay, that's a good question. 3 questions now. Let's take your question. And that makes 4. Please put your taking notes.
My question is still on the title, sir. You said from the citation to a book, the title has to be changed for it to be catchy. Is there a maximum or minimum word for the title?
Okay, that was simple. No, because I think you can have a title, the main title, and a lot of nowadays if you have a subtitle that is more descriptive. But the main title is what grabs attention and can hold attention. That main title is what publishers are mostly concerned with, because that's what the first thing people see when your book is sitting somewhere on the bookshelf or the library or in the bookstore. That's what usually they like to change. Sometimes they let you keep the subtitles, the descriptive part of the title, but sometimes they make you change the whole thing because it's just too awkward. The phrasing is just not appropriate for a book. But there's no, I don't know of any phrase that has a minimum. So I mean, the shorter the better. Is what I will tell you. Just the shorter the better. Yeah. So let's respond. Move on to any question we want to respond to. We have 3 now. 2 from there, 1 online.
I can respond to the question online, but I think we've spoken about it already about the creation issue. That it is ambitious to publish 2 books from one dissertation. The exception is if the dissertation has 2 clear theoretical frameworks, right? Where you could pitch one book based on one theory, right? And the empirics, and then the other book based on an additional theory and the empirics. Another thing is that you could actually think about the empirics, right? So for instance, if you have a theory and the empirics, one is based on, say, a single country, and then the other set is based cross-nationally or globally, you could also think about that, of pitching 2 different books, right? Based on that. But that's extremely ambitious. And I would say that after you've written one book on one subject, you get tired of it, right? And you need a break, right? And you have to move on, right? So it kind of limits, that's a limit that exists. I'll end there.
Let me just another additional wrinkle. If for us historians, I'm a historian, another circumstance that might accommodate those 2 is if you have 2 periods, 2 distinct periods, right? One is one part of the dissertation dates to the 19th century, the other part dates to the 20th century. There's logic to separating them and publishing them as separate books. So that's another.
Yeah, so to that's the point, I think this is worth clarifying. It's not, the rule of thumb is not 2 chapters out of the dissertation, it's 2 chapters out of the book. So if you have a dissertation that's 6 chapters, you publish 2 of them as articles and 4 as a book, that's not really going to, unless you're interfering with your own argument and sort of scooping yourself there, that's not really a problem. It's more about how much of the book to publish already. That's the concern. And this also goes to titling, actually. Another thing about titling, in addition to it being catchy, is that if someone does a quick search for this book, you want to go to the publisher's website, not your dissertation. So that's another reason that you want to retitle it. And hopefully the argument's different, so the title needs to be different. I hope that collectively we do talk more about the money question, because I think that's really crucial, and it's this industry is broken, frankly. And we don't talk about that enough, that this is work we're doing because we have jobs that give us flexibility to do it, but aren't necessarily paying us to do it. And it takes a lot of time and labor, and that much more true if you're not in an academic position. I think this is an important conversation to keep having.
I could I understand your question also as talking about why you are even doing the dissertation itself, money. Let me be, and I say this with no joy in my heart, that
What one of the panelists are sending
working because largely you are working in an environment that is quite consistently anti-intellectual and therefore does not understand the need to invest in what you are doing. A PhD work is not a play in the park. It's the breaking of ideas that can have significant impact on how society progresses and understands itself. I believe this is not my colleague there. I should speak to my experience. I had a different experience. Once money is taken care of, because nobody philosophizes on empty stomach. Once money is taken care of, one of your problems is down. You will have other problems. But that one is out of the way.
Yeah.
I don't know how to advise anyone working in this time other than to say, don't give up.
But let me add to this, right? The reason we are here on this panel is because we also believe in promoting in confidence boosting. Let me use this term, right? And so if you see any of us, and I can speak for myself on this panel, expanding your network of people who can mentor you, right, is going to be an essential step. So if any of you are doing work in political science and you think of publishing a book, or right, your political science as well, or literary studies, right, a scholar, right, and media, history, right. Take our information down from the program, right, and reach out to us, right, so that we can provide that type of advice and mentorship, right? Because that's the same thing I did as well, right? In many circumstances, met people who were, providing, advice like that. But it still is the case that you are at a disadvantage with regard to network, but also resources.
So I have a response to you, shortly, but
yeah,
we don't have 5 minutes. So there's a question online directed to you, based off of what you said, something you said earlier. So this person is talking about what you said earlier, like encouraging people to send proposals, book proposals to multiple presses. So this person is saying, her name is Helen Ugard. I know her, she's a colleague of ours. She said, would that not lead to a conflict of interest? That's the question, it's online.
Okay, so let me make a distinction, right? There are stages in the process of submission, right? There's an initial contact, right, where you send a letter, right, where a cover letter and your proposal, and you can send that to as many presses as you want, because your question is, are you interested in this book, right? When they respond, they can say, yes, I am interested, right? But there's a follow-up question that you can ask. If I submit my work to you,
Alright.
can I submit it to anyone else?
Yes, it's
They can
because we have
answer
another
yes
session. We have
or
another
no.
session. We have another session.
I had a case where they answered
Exactly.
yes,
But you can continue after the session.
and I considered submitting to multiples at that point. So you understand the stages, and Helen, I hope you understand. There are some presses who will say that they don't want you to submit your full manuscript to them and multiple other presses because it's hard to find reviewers, right? But how things are now, most of the major presses, right, will be interested in accepting, will be interested in you submitting to more than one press, but you have to ask that question.
Okay, so let me respond to the question. That is a very serious question. It's an ethical question.
Yeah.
Obviously. So what I would say, because we can continue the conversation after this, but what I would say is that that's wrong. But what the situation you've described is an outlier. I don't want us to leave this room thinking that happens all the time. It's an exception. Maybe it happens in some places more than it happens in others. But for the most part, when you have mentors, they are invested in your progress as a scholar and they pour ideas into you and they support you. But the situation you've described, I'm not dismissing it because I know about it. People have come to me with those concerns. But I think that you should, when it happens, or if it happens, you should speak up.
Yeah.
At that point, it's an ethical violation. There's no two ways about it. Whether it's in Nigeria or the US, I don't care. It's an ethical violation. You should speak up. You shouldn't. You are a victim at that point of intellectual theft, and you have to make it known. You have to name and shame. And I do hope that we have enough a robust oversight, administrative oversight, that will give you redress and adjudicate the matter properly. But I think it's an outlier.
Yeah.
That doesn't invalidate the points that have been made about constructive mentorship. Okay, I think let's leave it there. Let's continue the conversation. Thank you. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much. We've come to the end of the session.
Thank you.
I'll pick up that.
It's very frustrating. They're not chill. I mean, I'm talking about the challenges of the business.
Thank you.